As the Biden camp begins getting to work, the president remains defiant, claiming once again, without evidence, the election was rigged. President Trump spent much of the weekend on his Virginia golf course. He and his team are vowing to file more lawsuits, despite there being no clear legal path to 270 electoral votes. As we now know, CBS News projects Joe Biden will be the next president. He currently sits at 279 electoral votes, but that number is expected to rise. Let's bring in Kim Wehle now. She's a professor of law at the University of Baltimore. She's also the author of What You Need to Know About Voting and Why. Kim, welcome. Great to have you with us. So can you please walk us through the president's legal strategy? You know, we understand he's got several irons in the fire in different states. What exactly will his legal team be arguing?
Well, I like to think of these kinds of cases as sort of tinkering cases. That is, finding little errors that may or may not really be meaningful. And so far, they don't seem to amount to a whole lot. For example, an argument in Pennsylvania that there weren't enough people there to watch the canvassing process. The court said, well, you had at least one person there. And by the way, we'll let you get closer to the counters. I mean, so that's an example, not going to change the election, certainly not fraud. But the pileup of these lawsuits filed in Nevada, filed in Georgia, Georgia was dismissed, filed in Michigan, Michigan was dismissed, filed in Pennsylvania, creates an impression amongst many people, primarily I would assume those who voted for Donald Trump, that somehow there is nefariousness, there is fraud, there is serious unfairness and mismanagement. There just isn't any evidence for that. But in court, you don't need to show anything really to file the lawsuit. The filter that happens after you file the lawsuit. That's when the court will, what we say, dismiss or throw out the lawsuit. But you don't have to meet any threshold just to initiate it. And so I think the strategy is to create an impression of wrongdoing without actually having any evidence.
Interesting. Of course, it does seem that they are putting a lot of hope in Pennsylvania, in whatever legal challenges they are mounting there. What does the Trump team need to prove in order for their lawsuits to be picked up by the Supreme Court, which is what the president has said he is hoping for? You know, as of today, the campaign has provided very little tangible evidence of any wrongdoing.
Well, it seems like the most legitimate lawsuit that's pending in Pennsylvania is the one that actually started before the election. Remember, there were arguments leading up to the election that there shouldn't be early counting of votes, primarily by Republicans. The argument shouldn't be early counting on votes just because there's a pandemic. And then we got to the third, and the argument is we should stop counting votes. So you're sort of squished on either side. But essentially, the argument is, listen, in Pennsylvania, there was an extension of the time to count votes. So long as they were in by November 3rd, they could be counted after that. Republicans filed a lawsuit. The Supreme Court refused to intervene in that. The Republicans lost in the lower courts. But last week, recently, Justice Alito did agree to issue an order to segregate those ballots. That was already happening, so it didn't really make an impact. But essentially, it's not going to amount to anything unless the delta, the margin of those ballots is so huge. There's so many of those ballots that were counted after the third that even if Donald Trump were to win that claim that they shouldn't have been counted, which is a big if, it would swing the election. And there aren't numbers there. So courts aren't going to take what we call advisory opinions cases. They won't take cases if they can't actually make an impact or give some kind of relief. And that's another reason why a lot of these cases are getting thrown out, because the judges are saying, where's the evidence of fraud? They don't have any. And even if I give you what you want, how does that help you? Don't have an answer to that either.
So, Kim, what about the Democrats' defense? How do you expect them to navigate this potential legal battle, even if it is just as you point out, being waged to sort of create a perception and ultimately will have no legal bearing? How should Democrats respond?
Well, legally, I think what's happening is that they're moving to dismiss the cases. Again, two primary things you need to have a lawsuit you need to have what's called a cause of action. You have to have a legal claim, a law that you say was violated, and you have to have some facts. If you don't have those two things, the lawsuit gets the heave-ho, even if you think you deserve something. So the Democrats are coming in and saying there's no facts here, or the legal claim isn't really meaningful. It doesn't amount to anything. But that doesn't address the perception. Again, I mean, I've been doing a lot of speaking, call-in radio shows, things like that. There are a lot of Americans who really believe that there was fraud and are very upset that nothing's being done about the fraud. But there is no fraud. So there is some success, not legally, but in the perception, the politics of this for the Trump campaign.
You know, looking to the other side of the aisle, though, there is the perception that there was some, there was some malignant actions as well. It may not make any sense to take legal action when you're on the winning side. But for instance, in Michigan, there are some officials there that are saying, look, we really want to know what happened with the mail system in Detroit. Like, we are legitimately worried that there's still, ballots that were slowed down in the mail. We don't understand why. We think if there's any legal action to be taken, it might be there. So do you think that there is any point for, Democratic officials to sort of meet kind with kind in this situation?
No, I mean, I think politically, no. I think it's just bad, and also for the rule of law, for the Constitution, for the American system of elections. I mean, this was a safe election. You've had people on, elections officials. These are regular people working very, very hard. But the question of what the United States Postal Service did, that is a different story. If the Democrats come and say, listen, I have a tinkering case, I'm upset about a couple ballots, the court's going to say, I can't help you with that. You've already won. I can't give you any relief. But if the U.S. Postal Service did something wrong, you can go into court and say, listen, we need to fix this because we're taxpayers. We get mail. We're citizens, or it could be a group that has interest in these issues, and say, listen, court, you need to tell the U.S. Postal Service to clean up its act going forward. So in the next election, we don't have that problem. That's a completely different issue. And we know Judge Sullivan here in the district court in D.C. has basically signaled that he might even hold some contempt-related proceedings because he did order the Postal Service to do a sweep to find what was perceived to be missing mail on Election Day. And stunningly, frankly, the U.S. Postal Service came back and said, nope, we're not going to do that. You have to be really careful about not complying with a court order. Courts don't like that, and for good reason, because if we could ignore court orders, we'd have chaos.
Right. All right. Well, Kim Wehle, thank you so much for sharing your legal expertise with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.